The first time Leah Navarro noticed the ceiling stain, the Oval Office was empty, and the storm outside made the floorboards hum in the bones. It wasn't really a stain so much as a shadow pretending to be one, an irregular bloom above the resolute desk, like spilled ink with a heartbeat. The chandelier shivered. Somewhere in the old ducts, a child laughed, thin as a breath through a reed. Leah blinked. The stain tightened, as though it sensed the attention. She lowered her camera and listened. Tourists clicked through the east wing. Press secretaries hissed behind soundproof doors. An aide hurried past, leading a young influencer with a million-watt smile and scuffed sneakers, the boy's excitement radiating off him in embarrassed waves. He didn't see Leah. People rarely did when she let her reporter's skin slide over the human one. Patient, still, all eyes. "Ms. Navarro," came a voice like a velvet sleeve. "You're not scheduled in here." Chief of Staff Marla Kincaid was all angles and teeth. Leah swallowed the 1,000 questions that buzzed like a beehive behind her sternum and lifted her laminated badge so it flashed under the chandelier. "Blue pool, background color. I'm off the record unless you want me on it." Kincaid's smile tilted, practiced and precise. "I never want you on it." Her eyes slid to the ceiling. She did not look back up. "This room's unavailable." Leah left, but as the doors drew shut, she caught one last ripple above the desk, as if something just beneath the paint had rolled over to watch her go. Outside, rain slashed the south lawn into dark stripes. The White House is smaller in person, Leah thought, until you realize it has basements. And the basements have basements, and beneath that, the city's bones, tunnels, conduits, forgotten rooms. Power always grows downward, the roots drink where no one looks. She did not put that in her notes. She wrote, "Oval Office stain, organic, pipes, ask facilities." She wrote, "Dylan invited to strategy session, ask him what they want." She wrote, "Moore looks thinner on camera, eyes, pupils, check archival footage." And then, in an uncharacteristic private scrawl, "It's watching." Chapter 1. The Teeth of the Building. The press briefing was a chorus of practiced questions and elegant evasions. President Alexander Moore, once a charismatic governor with a speechwriter's knack for kitchen table anecdotes, now looked half a shade removed from life, like a portrait hung where the original had been. He smiled too long at nothing. He blinked, late to the conversational turn. When a reporter asked about emergency appropriations, he said, "We feed on..." The room stilled. "Feedback. We feed on feedback." He recovered, a slow smile unfurling as his pupils ballooned, then shrank with the camera flashes. Leah glanced at the flat screens along the back wall. The live feed lagged by a fraction of a second. In the delay, Moore's grin spread wider than his bones allowed, and then corrected, like a bad deepfake rewriting itself in real time. A draft threaded the press rows. Leah could smell damp paint. It reminded her of old-school hallways and the way shadows look like hands when the janitor kills the light. She slid her phone from her blazer. A message bubbled from Dylan Chase. 22, political wunderkind with the comedian's reflex and the body language of a terrarium frog that just discovered there's a world outside the glass. "Dylan, weirdest invite of my life. I'm in the West Wing green room. Think you can get me out if I text pineapple?" Leah, "You allergic to pineapples?" Dylan, "I am tonight." She slipped out during a lull about trade subcommittees. The West Wing corridors were freshly painted, but the air held a wet basement chill. Behind a propped door, a maintenance guy troweled something onto a gouge in the plaster. He didn't whistle. He didn't sway to a playlist. He worked like a person who counted the strokes out loud in his head to keep from hearing whatever the building murmured to him when he stopped. The green room was too bright, too cheerful, too staged. Dylan sat on the couch gripping a paper cup, as if caffeine could build a barricade around his nerves. He wore a hoodie with a novelty tie printed on it. His leg bounced, heel jackhammering the carpet. On the TV, the press conference played in a corner window, muted. "You got tall," Leah said, because he had, and because an ordinary sentence sometimes steadies the ground. "Everyone here is shorter than I thought." His grin showed too many teeth. "They said I'll get to pitch a youth engagement initiative." Also, there was a guy outside with eyes like they'd been painted on, and the paint hadn't dried. "Say pineapple, if you want me to extract you," Leah said, curving a smile through a voice that wanted to tell him to run. "Pineapple is safe word for don't be a coward," he said. "I'll text you after." Leah squeezed his shoulder on the way out. It was like touching a light bulb. He was too warm, nerves frizzing every hair. As she closed the door, she felt the room's pressure shift, the way air will flex when a large body moves in a swimming pool. She did not look back. In the corridor, she paused with her phone in the little invisible pocket where reception turns brittle, because the building is old and temperamental and possessive of its secrets. She put her ear near the wall, a childish act she knew. Something moved on the other side. Not pipes, not rats, not footsteps. Imagine velvet dragging over teeth. Imagine a curtain made of breath. She found the facilities office, flashed her press pass and a smile, and asked, casual as rain, "Any trouble with the HVAC?" The man behind the desk rubbed his jaw with the heel of his hand. "Wind like this? Always. That old sub-basement turns into a flute." "Sub-basement," Leah said lightly. "I thought there were two." The man's mouth tightened. "There are the basements, and then there's the stuff no one calls anything." "We don't use those rooms." He said it as if the rooms used them. "What's down there?" she asked. "You ever work somewhere old?" he said. "There's always a little bit of yesterday under the floorboards." He looked at her badge, then at her eyes, as if weighing which was more real. Her phone buzzed. "Dylan, no pineapple. Phone's not allowed in the meeting, but I smuggled it in my shoe. I shouldn't have told you that. If they murder me, tell my mom I died brave. Leah, don't joke. Text me when you're out." No answer. Chapter 2. Unison. The cabinet meeting was theoretically closed, but the long mirrored wall across from the Roosevelt room doors made a perfect trick. If you stood at the right angle and breathed like you weren't there, you could watch a ghost of what happened inside, reflections smeared but shapes correct, gestures readable, lips a pantomime in reverse. Leah watched men and women whose names paid mortgages in 1,000 newsrooms lean in with the hungry tilt of people who know slogans are meat and cameras are teeth. The president entered last. He did not sit. He folded like a marionette settling under a puppeteer's hand. Leah's pulse ticked in her throat. A staffer dimmed the lights. The mirrored hallway darkened around her until her own reflection vanished. In the black glass, the conference room gleamed, a stage-lit fish tank. Above the president, the ceiling stain was back, a dark tide pooling where the lamplight couldn't quite reach. Leah pressed her nails into her palm. "Approval ratings show dips in youth segments," someone said, voice rich with calm. "We need to influence the influencers. Friendly ones get access, unfriendly ones get reminders." "More than reminders," said a woman with hair like a law book. "If we purchase loud fear on one side, we can sell quiet safety on the other." The president's pupils widened until the iris was a ring. His lips moved, slow as if tasting the words from far away. "Feed them." He made a small, pleased sound. "On camera." "Sir?" The chief of staff's tone was cool water. "You mean feed them the line?" "The line," he echoed, and his smile grew until the edges of it hid behind his cheeks. Leah's heartbeat was trying to climb out of her throat. She shifted, and her elbow kissed the mirrored wall. The glass was warm. For a second, she had the wild thought that a large animal was sleeping on the other side of it, breathing deep, heating the pain. Her stomach flipped. "Dylan Chase," said an aide. Leah's back went ice. "He's on deck." Great numbers, young, fearful. There was a small, polite silence. Then the president said, in a voice that did not belong in human throats, "Bring him down." "Down?" someone asked. "The mural," the president whispered to the table. "It gets hungry." Leah left so fast her heels snapped against tile, echoing. At the corner, a Secret Service agent with shoulders like a piano tipped his chin at her. "You look lost." "Looking for the bathroom," she said. "That way," he said, pointing in the opposite direction of every sign. When she hesitated, he smiled with only part of his face, like a curtain lifted by a cautious hand. "Unless you're looking for something else." "Do you ever hear—" she began and stopped. The question sounded stupid, 10 steps out of her mouth. But the agent's eyelids flickered, a human twitch. "Hear what?" he asked. "Voices through the vents," she said, because that was a smaller truth. "Laughing," she swallowed. "Kids." The agent studied her with the patient attention of a man deciding whether a sound belongs to the house or to something in it. "I'm off in 10, he said. "Try not to be brave until then." "What if they take him downstairs?" she said. "Then we're already late." Chapter 3. The Sub-Basement. They used an employee service elevator that smelled of bleach and old pennies. The floor numbers ticked down. The agent, Marcus Holt, per his lapel pin, stood with the steadiness of a mountain in a windstorm. The doors opened onto a corridor that had never been a corridor. It had been a storage spine once, and before that, a foundation trench, and before that, dirt. The light down here was yellow and honest about it. Pipes sweated. Old brick breathed. The door at the far end had no knob, only a bronze ring, smoothed by hands that had not all been alive when they touched it. Marcus dug a key from a pocket, a long thing that belonged in a dangerous fairy tale, and turned a lock Leah hadn't seen. The door sighed. The room beyond was both small and infinite. The walls were close, the ceiling was low, but the mural called the eye into a distance that wasn't there. It was not one picture, but a palimpsest, layers of paint laid by hands that never met, an accumulation of worship. In the oldest stratum, a black-winged figure reclined on a throne made of masks. Newer hands had whitewashed over it, then painted mottos in Latin, then symbols, then a cheerful pastoral, then a patriotic allegory, then a modern abstraction of red loops like arteries, then another whitewash, then silence. The silence peeled back to show a grin. Leah felt her scalp tighten as if fingers sank into it from behind. She took a step closer. The painted surface rippled as paint shouldn't, as water does when something large swims beneath. A child's laugh bubbled through the pipes, a sound with too many teeth in it. She swallowed the taste of old copper. Marcus said softly, "Sometimes we turn off the cameras down here so people don't quit." "We," Leah said. "People like me," Marcus said, "who are supposed to keep him safe." He tipped his head toward the ceiling, toward everything. "We tried to keep the building safe from it, but the building already belongs to it." The far wall opened. He hadn't touched it, and yet a door unstitched itself from the bricks, like a wound remembering how to bleed. Beyond, stairs, voices. Leah heard Dylan's voice floating down like a helium balloon, brave and scared. "Just say the words and I'll repeat them, I guess. That's my job, right? That's everyone's job." Leah ran before she felt herself run. Marcus hissed once, a warning that could have been a prayer, and followed. Chapter 4. The Mouth in the Wall. The room at the bottom of the stairs might have once been a wine cellar or a chapel, or the kind of place you say things you don't want to rise. Now it was a set. 2 cameras perched on tripods, a ring light haloed a podium. The president stood off to the side like a wax figure, lips parted, eyes wide. The chief of staff's pen made no sound on her pad, and Leah had the sudden deranged idea that the ink was moving by itself. Dylan stood at the podium. A man in a gray suit, no name because names would make him human, leaned in and murmured something that made Dylan's jaw clench. The room's back wall, which in honest architecture should have been cinder block, was the mural again, but not the version upstairs. This layer was newer and hungrier. The black-winged thing had shed the pretense of allegory. It wore a face that rearranged between looks. An avuncular newscaster, a beloved teacher, a friendly neighbor. The smiling grandfather you didn't notice had no shadow. Its eyes were cataract white and full of audience. "Look at me," Leah whispered, though she meant it to herself. Dylan looked at the cameras. Then he looked past them. He saw Leah. His mouth made a little, "Oh." His eyes filled so fast the tears didn't know where to go. The president stood off to the side like a wax figure, lips parted, eyes wide. The chief of staff's pen made no sound on her pad, and Leah had the sudden deranged idea that the ink was moving by itself. Dylan stood at the podium. A man in a gray suit, no name because names would make him human, leaned in and murmured something that made Dylan's jaw clench. The room's back wall, which in honest architecture should have been cinder block, was the mural again, but not the version upstairs. This layer was newer and hungrier. The black-winged thing had shed the pretense of allegory. It wore a face that rearranged between looks. An avuncular newscaster, a beloved teacher, a friendly neighbor. The smiling grandfather you didn't notice had no shadow. Its eyes were cataract white and full of audience. "Look at me," Leah whispered, though she meant it to herself. Dylan looked at the cameras. Then he looked past them. He saw Leah. His mouth made a little, "Oh." His eyes filled so fast the tears didn't know where to go. He flinched, as if something had reached inside him and pinched. "Repeat after me," said the gray suit, and the sound came out of him twice, once from his mouth, once from the mural. "Echo and origin married," Dylan repeated. Words about safety, words about threat, words designed to thrum in young sternums and make hands shake on the share button. As he spoke, his breath fogged. The room did not warrant fog. It was warm with lights and bodies. The fog drifted toward the mural, and the mural's smile widened. It was drinking him. The fog thickened to mist, and the mist darkened to a ribbon, and the ribbon streamed into the painted mouth. Dylan's pupils blew so wide his eyes went black. He stammered, shook it off, finished the sentence like a champ. Leah realized she had walked forward. Marcus's hand closed around her arm above the elbow, a pressure that said, "Alive now, heroics later." Leah's teeth hurt. She tasted winter. "Stop," she said. No one heard except the thing in the wall. It turned 2 painted knot eyes to her. "Leah," it said, using a voice she hadn't heard in 10 years, her father's when he'd said he was proud. The room groaned as if the ceiling remembered snow. Marcus's other hand went to the small of her back and pushed. Somehow they were moving. Somehow they were away. Leah did not remember the stairs, or the mural's grin stretching across the wall like a rip, or Dylan's little brave chuckle to show he was fine, fine, he was always fine. Her legs remembered for her. Up the corridor, into the elevator. The doors closed. The elevator climbed like something was holding onto its cables for fun. "Dylan," Leah said to the middle distance. Marcus looked at the ceiling as if asking a question and getting the answer he expected. We can't pull him out in there. It would notice. It would enjoy it. What is it? Leah asked. Marcus's jaw worked. He said with the fatal simplicity of a man who has stood in a dark room and learned the smell of it, it's what power looks like when it takes off its human suit. Chapter 5. The Takedowns. 3 days later, Dylan overdosed in his apartment 2 miles from the capital. Leah stood on the sidewalk while the coroner's van door thumped shut like a final period. It was summer hot, though the calendar said spring. A neighbor's wind chime argued with itself. A camera van idled at the corner, chewing gasoline. A detective with sleep in his whiskers asked Leah if she was family. She said no, but it sounded like yes. In the apartment, everything was too neat. The cup on the counter had no ring under it. The toothbrush lay exactly where an actor would place it. The walls felt like they were hearing too much. On Dylan's desk, in a chaos he had not curated, was a flash drive. Leah knew it because she had bought it, the silver kind with a wobbling hinge that Dylan said made him feel like a spy. A sticky note clung to it. If pineapple becomes real, you get the fruit salad. She closed her fingers around the metal as if it were a hand that wanted to keep being here. The footage on the drive showed the basement room from a wrong angle. Maybe the camera he'd hidden in his shoe. As ridiculous and brave as the boy. The ring light haloed the podium. The mural's grin moved with a liquid lag. Dylan's breath fogged and went away. Behind him, a White House physician pressed a stethoscope to the president's back. The president stared at the wall the way cats do when the air is full of what we can't see. A sound rose under the room tone. Leah turned the speakers up. The sound was the ocean and the inside of a seashell, and a crowd murmuring in a cathedral, and teeth clicking softly against each other while a person waits for something to start. Then came words in a chorus. Not unison, but harmony. A chord built from many mouths. Fear has a flavor, the chord said. The young season it best. It didn't end with Dylan. A month became a list of names Leah knew too well. Bright, loud kids who pointed cameras at their faces and told the world what to think. Some collected grants, unexpected and heavy. Some were arrested for crimes that felt scripted. Some got invited to retreats that smelled of money and orchards and private docks. They went, took pictures near planes, drank drinks they didn't know cost more than rent, made videos, and then, one by one, were taken down in meticulously public ways, revealed secrets, engineered scandals, orchestrated betrayals, and, when necessary, tragedies. Each takedown went viral. Each drew attention just long enough to swing eyes away from something else moving behind them. Leah mapped the timing. Every scandal bloomed a day before a vote, a day after a memo, an hour before a midnight appointment. The pattern arced like a shadow of wings. "You should stop," said Marcus, meeting her in a diner that smelled of frying and old hope. "People who tug the curtain get strangled in it." Leah flicked a sugar packet between 2 fingers and watched it blur. "If I stop, it still eats," she said. "Then don't go alone," he said. "I've got 1 foot in the building and 1 foot out. That means I'm useless everywhere, but at least I notice which way the floor tilts." "I need more than floor angles," she said. "You need a flight roster," he said. Chapter 6. Graves Isle. The flight logs came from a federal contractor with a hobby of staying alive. Leah sat on the floor of her apartment with papers spread like a tarot deck. Names glittered, times linked arms, planes ghosted across the map. DC to a dot outside Miami, Miami to a smaller dot in the Atlantic, the color of a bruise. Graves Isle, privately owned by Calvin Graves, philanthropist, yachtsman, donor. Friend of the president since the days when both smiled like wolves behind kindergarten name tags. Leah pulled up Zillow shots of the island and laughed because horror has a sense of humor. A Victorian mansion with too many gables, a cliff like a bitten lip, a private airstrip pretending to be a driveway. Press photos showed Graves's dimples, lawn parties, children in t-shirts emblazoned with words like educators and leaders. Their eyes had that bright bulb glaze of kids who learned too young how to sell. "I can get you past the first fence," Marcus said, eyes moving as if someone else owned the diner windows and he owed them rent. "After that, you'll need a miracle or a map." "I'll take both," Leah said. They met at a municipal helipad at the frothy part of night when dream logic still runs the streetlights. The helicopter smelled like hot plastic and storm water. Marcus handed her a headset and a pistol as if one were basic courtesy and the other an afterthought. "I don't," Leah began, but her hand closed around the metal. It made a certain sense, even as it made no sense at all. "Don't point it at me," Marcus said, which was, Leah realized, another way of saying, "Please don't die." They lifted. The city fell away like a stage set rolled off into the wings. The ocean below was a quilt of black glass. The wind shoved the helicopter with both hands. Ahead, lightning stitched the horizon with crooked thread. Leah saw the island in the strobes, a mouthful of teeth, a mansion like a crown worn too tight, a runway pale as a bone. They sat down in the lee of a stand of crooked pines. The trees hissed, and Leah realized the sound was not wind, but whispered words, 1,000 children shushing each other in a library. "Do you hear?" she began. "I don't hear anything," Marcus said softly. "I never hear anything." Chapter 7. The House with Listening Walls. Calvin Graves's mansion had been built for money to echo in. Even the wallpaper seemed expensive. Their boots sank into carpets woven to remember footsteps. Leah carried the pistol like a talisman she did not believe in. Marcus moved like a man who knew where the cameras were, because a lifetime of watching other people had trained him to feel the gaze even without eyes. They slipped through the kitchen. Copper pots hung like helmets. A pot lid quivered. Leah saw her face in it, distorted, and someone else's behind her that wasn't Marcus. She did not turn. The pantry smelled of fruit long gone to ghost. Past a swinging door, a long dining room held a table set for 20. The candles had not been lit, but each wick smoked faintly as if insulted. At the end of the hall, a painted portrait of a 19th century matron had been tilted off-center. Behind it, they found a keyhole where no keyhole belonged. The key from Marcus's fairy tale fit. The wall swung back on oiled hinges. Cold air climbed out of the dark like a clever animal. "Basements under basements," Leah said. "Roots under roots," Marcus said. They descended. The first chamber was a museum of staged conscience, trophies of charity under glass, photos of smiling donors, plaques about scholarship programs. The second chamber was what people build when the door only opens if you lie to yourself. A theater. Velvet seats. A small stage. The curtains sagged like tired lungs. On the stage, bound and gagged, were 3 teenagers still in their branded retreat t-shirts, eyes glassy, faces wet. One boy watched Leah like a drowning man memorizing the shape of a shore he might never reach. Leah went to them. Marcus caught her shoulder. "If we cut them now, where do they go?" he asked. "Up into whose hands?" "Mine," Leah said, and heard the folly in it. A whispering rose. At first she thought it was the trees discovering their voices again. Then she realized it came from the air itself, from the walls, from the little gap between the skin and the bones. The whispering said, "Shh." The whispering said, "You'll like it better if you don't watch." Pause. They pressed on. The corridor narrowed to a throat. At its end, the world opened into a cavern that had never asked the house for permission. The ceiling soared with rock teeth, stalactites pointed like the fingers of the dead. A slick black lake lay at the bottom, breathing with the tide through a fissure. A platform jutted from the ledge, and on it, an altar that wasn't an altar because altars require a god, and this thing had none above it. It was its own devotion. The president knelt at the platform edge, hands folded like a good church boy, eyes gone to a black that moved. Calvin Graves stood beside him, a hand on the president's shoulder, a friend's touch. Around them, men and women in suits hummed a harmony that made Leah's teeth hurt. On the far side of the lake, in a shadow that refused the light, the black-winged thing from the murals gathered itself out of smoke and faces. It had borrowed a grin you would let babysit your child. It had borrowed eyes you would vote for. It had borrowed the timbre of 1,000 gentle voices. It stood, and the wings unfolded, and on each feather a child's reflection flickered and went out. "You took too long," the thing said, not to Leah, but to the room. The president's lips moved. "I fed them lines. They fed you fear." The thing made a sound like a satisfied cat. "Yes," it said, and turned its stolen face toward Leah without surprise. "And you brought me a poet." "Don't call me that," Leah said. Her voice shook. "Dignity is a luxury fear bankrupts. A poet is someone who learns the shape of a room by listening to its echoes," the thing said. "You have always been looking for the place where sound curves back on itself. This is that place." It gestured, and a spotlight found the 3 teenagers, now brought to the platform by people whose eyes reflected light like a dog's. The teenagers' fear drifted, not fog now, but threads. The threads pulled tight toward the thing's open smile. "Watch," it invited, "or save them, and lose 3,000 more you will never meet when the machine you adore finishes chewing." "Let them go," Leah said. "Take me." The words left her mouth without permission. It felt like throwing your own body into a river to build a bridge. "Old fear is tough," the thing said, amused. "Takes work. I prefer the summer fruit, the ones who still sleep with the light on the night after a horror movie, the ones whose bones haven't learned resignation." Marcus's hand found Leah's sleeve. He did not pull. He simply placed himself at the hinge of her impulse and the world. His other hand, Leah saw, held a small black box the size of a wallet. "What is that?" she asked out of the side of her fear. "Uplink," he said. "If this place has a sky, we can talk to it." Leah bent her mouth toward the box without looking down. "Can you broadcast?" "You have no idea how loud I can be when I'm tired of being quiet," Marcus said. Chapter 8. The Feed. Leah thumbed the live icon and let her voice do what it had been trained to do since she learned the pleasure of a clean sentence. She described the room, the smell of salt and old paper, the teenagers' faces, the way one had a freckle under his left eye like a single star, the president nodding like a child who knows the answer and fears it, Calvin Graves touching him, a friend steadying a friend, a hand that had pushed him down 1,000 stairs and called it guidance. She described the thing without giving it the dignity of a name. On a dozen platforms in 100 feeds, the broadcast blinked into life. Comments fell like confetti thrown by ghosts. Fake. CGI. I knew it. What is this? Where is this? That's my cousin. That's my cousin. Run! Run! The thing tilted its head. "So we burn me," it said amiably. "What do you give them when I'm gone?" "A villain fits better than a hole." It stepped closer. Its feet did not stir air. The air made way too eagerly. "I am not your disease. I am your symptom. You keep bringing me back because you like the way I make your stories feel finished." Leah kept talking. People with cameras and microphones are taught to keep talking when the room tilts, because silence lets other mouths climb in. She described how fear moves in a crowd like a rumor, and how power breeds in corners, and how the building in DC had teeth under the paint. She described her own shame at how thrilling it had felt sometimes to be close to the mouth of things. The thing smiled with all its borrowed faces. "There you are," it said. "Tell them the truth. That it's never me, that it's you." "That's the trick," Leah said into the camera, and hated how good the sentence sounded. "This is not an exoneration of leaders. This is a confession of rooms." Marcus's thumb flicked the box's guard aside. A red LED woke. He glanced at her. "How many?" she asked, meaning viewers, meaning hope. "Enough to make someone upstairs nervous," he said. The teenagers began to convulse. Their fear, their fear, their fear. Threads sang like harp strings being plucked by a thing that had never read poetry and did not need to. Leah's voice broke on a word, and she did not fix it. She lowered the pistol and did not know when she had raised it. She drew aim not at the teenagers, never, and not at the president, not yet, but at the drum of jet fuel canisters stacked in the shadow behind the platform, a stack she had clocked without naming. We often see our salvation before we dare to call it that. "Leah," Marcus said. "Say it if you want," she told him. He didn't. He fired first. The muzzle flash was a small sunrise. The first can ruptured. The fuel smelled like a childhood she didn't have. The flame took a breath and made a decision. Heat flattened the air. The thing's smile finally faltered. Not in fear, Leah registered with an anthracite satisfaction, but in annoyance. The ceiling cracked in a line right over its head, and sunlight, real and golden and a little ridiculous, speared down like a laugh too loud for a funeral. The thing flinched. Marcus shoved Leah toward the teenagers. She cut rope with a knife she did not recall accepting. The teenagers stood like sleepwalkers, then folded like paper, then tried again. And this time their hands remembered how to be hands. Flames hopped a fissure. The room stitched itself with light. The president blinked. The black in his eyes drained like ink through paper into the floor. He sucked in air like a man who had only ever breathed smoke. Calvin Graves stepped back, one hand still on the president's shoulder, calculating how best to leave alone. Leah dragged the nearest teenager by the armpits. Marcus scooped up another like a sack he would protect with his ribs. The third boy, the one with the freckle star, stumbled on his own legs like a deer, remembering Forrest. "My mom," he said, because at desperation's root we all speak toddler. "I know," Leah said. "Say it again so your body listens." The platform heaved. The thing's wings beat once. The sound was a stadium learning grief. "You will grow me again," it said, as flame climbed its portrait body, as light found it and refused to consider it sacred. "You always do." "Maybe," Leah said, "but maybe I teach them what your voice feels like in their throats." She didn't know if the mic still worked. She didn't know if she was preaching to Ash. She spoke to the boy's freckle like a lighthouse speaks to one boat. They ran. The tunnel behind them sucked air like a lung. The house above complained as if it had to host a vulgar party it hadn't planned. In the theater, the velvet seats smoldered without flame. In the charity museum, the glass cases spidered with cracks that gleamed like a new kind of plaque. In the dining room, the unlit candles burned without fire and without smoke and without heat. And Leah didn't have time to inventory what that meant. They broke into the night like birds let loose in a church. The pines hissed. The helicopter squatted on its skids like a dog waiting to be told it was good. The rotor spun up with a whine like a tooth in a drill. Marcus shoved the kids inside, then Leah, then threw himself after them. The wind tried to take the helicopter by the eyebrows. Marcus told it no. The island fell away, small and mean. The mansion's roof sagged with smoke. The cliff bit its lip. The ocean breathed, indifferent. Chapter 9. After. The news ate itself for 3 days, then tried to puke up a narrative. The president gave a speech that was both contrition and audition. He promised investigations and found none. He promised daylight and rolled it back with a storm. He smiled and his pupils were normal. Almost. Cameras add half a stop of anything you want to see. Calvin Graves disappeared in the manner of men who know which holes lead to air. His foundation issued statements that sounded like parodies of statements. The island was secured. The teenagers' parents thanked donors, then lawyers. The teenagers themselves learned how to live in bodies that had been instruments. Leah uploaded, then re-uploaded, then re-uploaded every angle she had, every sound, every breath. The platforms throttled, then restored, then accidentally demonetized, then apologized with a coupon code for a merch store for a cause no one believed. Her face became a face people fought under in comment threads. Friends called to ask if she was safe. Strangers called to say she should die. Her reflection acquired a new stillness, the kind that learns the weather of threats and knows which storms will pass over and which will squat. Marcus stopped returning texts, then returned one. "I'm here, just not where my phone is." She sent him a photograph of the Freckle Star boy holding a soccer ball he'd been given by a local team that had seen the broadcast and wept. "Still here," she typed. He sent back a thumbs up and 3 dots that never finished into a sentence. Leah's ceiling cracked one night, a hairline, nothing to call a landlord about. She lay on the floor under it with the lights off and listened. The house murmured like a person turning over in sleep. The city growled. Her phone buzzed with small violences dressed up as jokes. She put it face down and stared until the crack was part of the stars. She thought of the mural upstairs in the White House, the one painted and plastered and painted and plastered, history layered over history like a person covers a bruise with foundation. She thought of the stain that was not a stain. She thought of the way the building sometimes breathed out children's laughter and wondered if the sound had changed now, or if she would always hear it because she knew to listen. On the 4th day, the president stood at a podium with the flag reflected in his eyes and said, "Clean as glass. We are committed to transparency." His smile was smaller, appropriate to the gravity of the moment. Somewhere between light and lens, Leah watched its edges worry her again. Her kitchen's old pipes sighed. In the dead space between anchor banter and commercial music, she heard one small, delighted giggle, the kind children make when they master a magic trick. Leah's hand went to the table, palm flat, steadying her. "Not finished," she told the empty room. "Not a villain. Not a hole. A room." The words felt wrong and right together. She picked up her pen and wrote them down anyway. Sometimes the sentence arrives before it becomes true. Outside, the storm rolled away. The sky turned the color of paper. Somewhere in a basement painted too many times, a wall dried. The dark patch above the desk pulled itself in as if smirking. And in that stillness just before the next breath, Leah heard, very faintly, like a radio catching a station from the other side of a river, small feet running down a hall. They were running away. They were running toward. The difference, as always, would be decided by who opened the next door.